people keep asking me, HuShang, when am I supposed to attack Protoss? And there's too many lasers, there's nothing I can do, and I'm goddamn tired of it. Today, we're going to answer this question once and for all, and get to the bottom of when to attack Protoss players, so you can start getting all the ladder points that you deserve. There's a lot of different reasons to begin an attack, and we're going to cover them all so that by the end of this guide, you're going to have a much better understanding of when to get aggressive. If you're new to the channel, and you're asking yourself, how do I know this guide isn't written by some noob pretending to know what he's talking about? And you got a fair point there, so a bit about myself. I'm a Grandmaster with all 3 races, and I've been coaching this game professionally for the past 10 years. I have several Grandmaster and hundreds of Master students, so if you're interested in one-on-one coaching, you can check out my website below. Alright, let's get into the guide. In today's video, we're going to be taking a closer look at when to attack Protoss players. For many advanced players, including myself, when to attack has become incredibly intuitive, and therefore it's often glossed over in tutorials and guides. It's just not something that you consider as much anymore as a high-level player. However, it's a very important concept for Terran players because it's up to you to keep Protoss in check. And I figured since we're seeing a larger number of bronze, silver, and gold players watching the channel, we could take a step back from some more advanced guides and refresh ourselves with some basics. Because Starcraft 2 is a very complex game, there are numerous ways you can play, including numerous ways to execute an attack. I've broken up when to attack Protoss into 5 distinct types that you can use to decide when it's the right time to launch an assault. These 5 attacks include all-inning, timing attacks, killing blows, trading supply, and feinting an attack. Let's first talk about all-ins. All-ins are an extremely aggressive strategy that has no fallback plan. We're going to talk about some more advanced ideas later, but I figured we'd better start with these simple ones. So if you're unfamiliar with the term all-in, it's exactly as it sounds. You're placing all of your chances of winning on this attack, and there's no turning back. You either win or you lose right away. Now this is obviously the simplest way to choose when to attack because we don't care at all about our opponent's strategy. We're simply going to do our all-in regardless of what the opponent does. And for brand new players, depending on the type of all-in, this can be a very powerful way to begin learning about the basics of the game. Although it doesn't prepare you for what an actual game of Starcraft is about, it does provide you with some practice learning the basic mechanics. So basic mechanics including stuff like learning about your race's basic buildings and units, how to hotkey those buildings and units, learning how to do an attack move command, as well as how to make control groups and how to make camera locations. And there's tons of guides in these concepts if you want to learn more. Alright, let's now talk about timing attacks. Timing attacks are key moments where the power of your army rises considerably, due to the recent completion of an upgrade such as Stimpack or Tutu, or when a key unit completes such as Ghosts, Liberators, or other tech units. Because your army strength has recently increased drastically in power, it's an optimal time for your units to be fighting. If you fight between upgrades or key units, you aren't taking full advantage of your previous investments. Some of these key upgrades or units can cause such a dramatic shift in your army strength that hitting before they are complete can cause you to lose a fight that you would otherwise win decisively. However, one common misconception is that you must attack when your upgrades or key units complete, and this is very wrong. Although timing attacks represent an optimal time for your units to be fighting, it says nothing about the opponent's position or composition. There are lots of situations where your opponent will have more army than you when your upgrades complete. And despite having that upgrade advantage or tech unit advantage, you will still lose the fight. So for example, if your opponent didn't invest any money into upgrades or tech, and that money was spent on units instead. Let's say you're playing a 3-1-1 build, which is a very common setup to prepare an attack with Stim, Combat Shield, and +1 attack. Right before you attack with this setup, you're going to throw down another command center and add some barracks. So in a lot of cases, this is the perfect time to put some pressure onto Protoss because your stim, combat shield, and +1 attack make your army considerably more powerful. However, should your opponent be doing something more committed, like a 2-base gateway all-in, you could still easily throw the game despite being in a fantastic position. In this situation, it makes sense not to attack, despite having an optimal timing, because you're getting further ahead as time goes on. Alright, let's talk about executing the killing blow. So another good time to attack Protoss is when you've created a large lead for yourself. This lead can be created a number of ways. For example, let's say you do a mine drop and it does major damage, or after an especially strong engagement where you win decisively. In either of these situations, you've managed to create a lead for yourself that allows you the opportunity to do a large attack. Assuming correct play, you should be able to close out games if your lead is large enough. This will, however, require you to have a strong game sense to understand when you've managed to pull ahead in the game and where the next opportunity for a timing attack will occur. Sometimes the optimal way to execute the killing blow is to turn it into a timing attack where your push coincides with some key upgrades or units, but it's not always necessary. You could also execute a killing blow after a large fight where you win resoundingly. In this situation, it would make a lot of sense to counterattack and try to end the game or deny one of the opponent's bases. Should you want to counter after a large fight, it's important to know whether you won the fight in a relatively even trade or whether you won by a large margin. If you try to counter attack after an even fight, the defender's advantage will likely make up for the advantage that you generated and will result in your attack failing. Therefore, if the attack is relatively even, it's often better to continue building upon your lead than to attack. However, if the fight went very well, then launching a killing blow can be a strong way of finishing your opponent. Okay, the next type of attack is a very important concept you're really going to want to know to become a strong player. But quickly before we talk about it, I wanted to tell you guys about a few ways you can improve much faster. And the first way is to join our Discord community. We have almost 500 members and it's completely free. You just need to download Discord. You'll find plenty of players at all skill levels to practice with, ask questions, and discuss the game. So we'd love to have you join us. And if you're extra serious about improving quickly, I have also arranged group practice sessions for our YouTube members in the elite tier or higher. During these sessions, we're playing scrimmages amongst each others, and I'll actively be giving advice and coaching. These group practices are twice a week. You can get access to these sessions through the join button on YouTube right beside the subscribe button. Okay, let's talk about trading supply. Attacking your opponent to trade supply is a very important concept in Starcraft 2. This type of attack is used to either change the composition of your own army or to suppress the superior composition of your opponent. As the game progresses towards the end game, units need to become more supply efficient instead of cost efficient. Units that were very powerful in the mid game due to their cost efficiency, such as Marines and Marauders, start to lose their effectiveness as they approach the supply limit. Because of this, you need to trade supply. There are two different approaches to trading supply, an aggressive and a defensive approach. Aggressive players should seek to trade supply by having large engagements in order to restrict the supply of their more defensive opponent. Defensive players should seek to lose a small amount of supply through drops or harassment, so that they can replace them with more supply efficient units. Let's take a closer look at why this is the case. If you're an aggressive player, you're not very interested in progressing your own tech very quickly. You would much prefer to continue the game by utilizing the more cost-efficient units, which allow you to continue attacking, such as Marines and Marauders. However, if you stay on these lower tier units at max supply for too long, we run into a problem. You end up giving your opponent time to create a better army, a more supply-efficient army, which will be more powerful should you have an engagement. To prevent this, we need to force a fight, and hopefully a favorable one. You may have heard "kill them before they get there" when asking how to deal with sophisticated endgame compositions such as Skytoss or Broodlord Infestor. This isn't true if you choose to play more defensive and tech quickly yourself, which we'll talk about soon, but it is true that you need to trade supply versus an opponent teching very quickly into these compositions if you are playing aggressive with cost-efficient armies. Trading supply like this allows us to prevent our opponent from creating the ultimate composition at max supply. Through this engagement, we will be reducing both our supply and our opponents, but this is actually advantageous for us because our units are more cost efficient, which allows us to continue trading advantageously. As a defensive player, you're not worried about your opponent's composition surpassing the effectiveness of your own because you're also crafting a very powerful and sophisticated composition. However, in order to continue improving your army past max supply, you need to get rid of the inefficient units in your army. Marines and Marauders, although good in the mid game, lose their strength after max supply and should be replaced by higher tier units in order to increase the power of your army. Against Protoss, this would include units such as Ghosts, Liberators, Vikings, or Tanks. Let's say you're developing your economy in a fairly passive game where neither player is attacking and you reach 200 out of 200 supply. You could attack your opponent directly if you like to play aggressive, like we talked about previously, but this gives your opponent a strong defender's advantage. A stronger way to trade supply, if you like to play defensive, would be to attack with a small or medium-sized force. These units would include mostly units that would not contribute to developing the perfect army. Instead, it would be comprised of units we don't want. So, in order to add new and more powerful units to your composition, you're going to need to lose some of your current army. And hopefully this will be able to do some economic damage to your opponent, but the main goal is to trade them for a superior composition. After continuing to improve your composition by trading supply, if your opponent doesn't do the same, you will have a large composition advantage and will likely win the endgame fight should it happen. Okay, the last way to know when to attack Protoss is when you want to create some weaknesses. So if you've ever done a drop and Protoss has just been totally ready for you and like 50 stalkers blinked on your drop and you got destroyed, that's because you weren't doing a very good job creating weaknesses. So with this type of attack, we're not really trying to attack. We're trying to make it seem like we're attacking. So our objective is to pull the opponent's army away from the real attack. So we're going to move out with most of our army, or maybe half of our army, a large portion that's going to make our opponent respond. And then after they've responded, we can, check if they've responded by using a scan or maybe some Marines out on the map. We're actually just going to pull back. And what this does is just create a weakness somewhere else on the map. So you might have like 4 medevacs flying into the main, and you're just trying to pull Protoss into their 3rd base or 4th base by using most of your army. But as soon as they react, you just pull back, and now your drop is set up to deal quite a bit of damage. Now, this is a little more advanced because when you do this, you cannot have a main fight. It's actually really important that you don't have a main fight against your opponent's whole army because you can easily throw the game. So when you fake these attacks, make sure that you back up as your secondary attack is beginning. And if your opponent decides to all-in you, then you can always use Defender's Advantage and survive. But you just don't want to have a fight in the middle of the map where they have their full army and you only have, a portion of your army, maybe 70% or 80%, because you're going to get smashed in that fight. And the reason you're going to get smashed is because everything in this game scales exponentially. So if your opponent has like 20% more army than you, then you're going to lose like your whole army and they're going to lose like barely anything because of how it scales. So make sure you do not take a main fight with a smaller portion than your opponent has. But yeah, this can be a very strong technique to open up some holes in your opponent's play, especially if they use the all army hotkey. So try this one out. And I think that's the end of the tutorial. So hopefully this helped, letting you guys know when you can attack Protoss. If you still have some questions, make sure to leave them in the comments. I tried to make this guide comprehensive, but I'm sure you guys Might still have a few questions here or there, so feel free to ask. And I will see you guys in the next video.